a father, a daughter, a son-in-law, and a billion-dollar empire that tore all three of them apart. Vince McMahon didn't just lose control of WWE. He watched his own daughter and son-in-law take over the company he spent his entire life building. And what came next wasn't a graceful exit. It was a systematic, calculated exposure of the people closest to him, starting with Stephanie. Her name in a federal lawsuit, her darkest family secrets on Netflix, her daughter's dreams derailed. All of it traceable back to one man who spent decades proving that in his world, nothing, not family, not loyalty, not love, was ever off the record. This is a story of how Vince McMahon burned down his own house and made sure Stephanie was standing inside when he lit the match. If you're new here, welcome to Effect Short. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we go deep on the stories that actually matter. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to January 2024. Former WWE employee Janelle Grant filed a federal lawsuit alleging sexual assault, emotional abuse, and sex trafficking at the hands of Vince McMahon and former EVP of Talent Relations John Laurinaitis. The timing was almost poetic in the worst possible way. Just 2 days before the lawsuit dropped, WWE had closed a landmark 10-year deal with Netflix worth $5 billion for the rights to Monday Night Raw. Dwayne Johnson had just been appointed to the TKO board. The company was riding the highest wave it had seen in years. And then the lawsuit hit like a steel chair to the back of the skull. Vince McMahon resigned as TKO executive chairman on January 26, 1 day after the filing. He denied everything, calling the allegations lies and a vindictive distortion of the truth. But buried inside that lawsuit was something that would haunt the McMahon family long after the headlines moved on. The suit didn't just name Vince and Laurinaitis. It referenced 4 unnamed WWE corporate officers who allegedly knew about McMahon's relationship with Grant or helped facilitate aspects of her employment, for anonymous figures described as being inside the inner circle. When Front Office Sports revealed their identities in March 2024, corporate officer number 3 was Stephanie McMahon, not an enemy, not a rival, his own daughter. The lawsuit described Stephanie as having knowledge of other instances of McMahon engaging in inappropriate sexual conduct. Her name appeared alongside Nick Khan as corporate officer number 1 and Brad Bloom as corporate officer number 2, 2 men the suit described as McMahon's fixers. Now here's a layer that makes this so much more complicated. At the time all of this was unfolding, Triple H, Stephanie's husband, was running WWE Creative. He had taken over after Vince's initial retirement in July 2022 and had been rebuilding the company's creative direction ever since. Leaked text messages from court documents showed that Triple H was deeply uncomfortable with Vince's continued presence, at one point texting Nick Khan asking what Vince was doing showing up to a Raw taping in Cleveland without warning. Triple H and Vince were not aligned. Stephanie was caught directly between them. Or, depending on how you read the situation, she had already chosen a side, which brings us to the question that nobody has been able to answer definitively. Did Vince McMahon deliberately drag Stephanie's name into the public record? Through the lawsuit, through the Netflix documentary, through every piece of information that leaked out, as a calculated act of revenge against the couple who took his throne? Before the lawsuit, there was Netflix. The 6-part docuseries Mr. McMahon premiered in September 2024. It had been in development since 2019 and was nearly complete in 2022 before the Wall Street Journal was reporting on McMahon's $12 million in hush money payments to 4 women forced the production to pivot and expand. The final cut featured over 100 hours of interview footage from legends like Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, and the McMahon family themselves. And then came the moment that nobody who watched it will forget. Stephanie was asked on camera if her father had ever pitched storyline ideas that she had refused. She laughed. She deflected. Yeah, there were a couple, she said, but I'm not going to tell that one. She was clearly drawing a line, protecting whatever remained of the family's image, choosing silence over exposure. Vince McMahon walked right over that line. The documentary cut directly to Vince, who told the producers exactly what Stephanie refused to say. He revealed that one of his creative ideas was for Stephanie's character to become pregnant, with his own character written as a father on national television, involving his actual daughter. He smiled when he described it. He then acknowledged that after Stephanie rejected that idea, he pitched that Shane McMahon, Stephanie's brother, be the father instead. Both concepts were rejected. The storyline never happened. Now, hardcore wrestling fans had heard whispers of this before. It had surfaced briefly on a 2006 DVD where Stephanie described the pitch as completely disgusting. But the Netflix documentary brought it to an audience of millions of casual viewers who had never heard of the Attitude Era, who had no context for Vince's boundary-pushing creative history, and who watched a man casually smile while describing an incest storyline involving his real daughter while she was actually pregnant with Triple H's child. And Vince didn't stop there. The series also documented that McMahon had booked himself in a match against Stephanie just 6 days before her wedding to Triple H, with his wife Linda threatening to leave him if Stephanie came out of that match with a black eye. Stephanie had also rejected Vince's push to broadcast her actual wedding to Triple H on pay-per-view. The portrait that emerged was of a man who had spent his entire career refusing to separate family from content, reality from storyline, control from cruelty. The timing of everything matters more than people realize. McMahon reportedly attempted to purchase the documentary outright after growing concerned about some of the footage. Netflix declined. He then reportedly asked his longtime ally Ari Emanuel to raise concerns about how he was being portrayed in the series. When that didn't work either, when he couldn't buy it and couldn't kill it, he went on camera and made sure that Stephanie's most uncomfortable secrets became part of the final cut. She wanted to protect the story. He made sure it got told. To fully understand why, you have to trace the war for control of WWE that had been building for years. In July 2022, Vince retired as CEO following an internal investigation into hush money payments to former employees. Stephanie and Nick Khan took over as co-COOs. Triple H was installed as head of creative. For the first time in the company's modern history, WWE was operating without Vince McMahon's hands on the controls. It lasted less than a year. In January 2023, Vince came back. He exited retirement, returned as executive chairman amid rumors the company would be sold, and immediately reshuffled the power structure. The response from Stephanie was immediate. She resigned. She didn't fight for her position. She walked out. Her father returned, and she was gone. The prevailing read at the time was that Stephanie couldn't function under Vince's renewed authority, particularly given the escalating scandal surrounding him. But the fallout was deeper than a professional disagreement. Former WWE head writer Vince Russo publicly addressed the tension, saying that it was complicated because Triple H and Stephanie had, in his words, screwed over the father-in-law and the father. On the Masters of Wrestling podcast, Martin Stone floated a theory that Triple H and Stephanie were the ones who leaked the NDA information to the Wall Street Journal in order to force Vince off the board of directors. That theory has never been proven. But if Vince McMahon believed it, and given his documented paranoia and the text messages showing Triple H's unease with his presence, the belief alone would have been enough to fuel everything that followed. The legal architecture around all of this became increasingly complicated. A separate shareholder lawsuit filed in Delaware alleged that McMahon had predetermined the TKO merger with Endeavor to protect his own position at the company despite the mounting misconduct allegations. Court documents from that case revealed text exchanges between Triple H and Nick Khan, painting a picture of a power structure defined by fracture and distrust. Documents also surfaced showing that Vince McMahon, Stephanie, and Khan had all met with Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel and President Mark Shapiro in December 2022, just weeks before Vince bulldozed his way back into the company and effectively forced Stephanie out. She was in that room. She knew what was coming. And she still ended up on the outside. By 2024, Vince was gone for good following the Grant lawsuit. He sold off his remaining TKO shares for over $776 million and severed all formal ties with WWE. He was out, wealthy, and free from institutional accountability. But the damage to Stephanie was already done, being named as corporate officer number 3 in a federal sex trafficking lawsuit. Even in an ambiguous context, even without any direct accusation of sexual misconduct, carries weight that doesn't simply disappear. Stephanie had spent years building a specific public identity. The progressive executive, the champion of the women's revolution, the face of a new WWE, being attached, even tangentially, to a scandal of this magnitude contradicts everything that image was built on. Grant's attorney confirmed Stephanie's identity publicly. The specific allegation in the lawsuit was that Stephanie had gestured for Grant to sit near her during an executive committee meeting, and that she was aware of other instances of inappropriate conduct involving her father. No direct accusation of wrongdoing, but the association itself is permanent. The ripple effects reach further than the professional. Stephanie revealed on her podcast that her daughter Aurora, who had been training with future WWE Hall of Famer Natalya and had expressed genuine interest in following the family into wrestling, stepped away from those plans after her grandfather's allegations became public. The exposure didn't just damage Stephanie's reputation. It altered her child's future. Through all of it, Stephanie has remained largely silent. No public statement condemning her father. No press conference addressing the lawsuit. She has chosen distance over declaration, making only occasional appearances connected to WWE since her departure, including welcoming the crowd at WrestleMania XL and attending SummerSlam 2024. Triple H has navigated the situation with more visibility by necessity. He runs a company. He can't disappear. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2025, and during his speech, he acknowledged Vince McMahon, crediting him for his rise, while clearly wrestling with the weight of everything that followed. He walks a tightrope every single day, running the empire Vince built, married to the woman Vince exposed, knowing exactly how he got to where he is. So did Vince McMahon deliberately use Stephanie as a weapon against Triple H? Here is what the evidence actually shows. Vince lost control of his company. His daughter and son-in-law held power during the period when the Wall Street Journal investigation broke. When Vince returned in early 2023, Stephanie resigned rather than coexist with him. When the Grant lawsuit removed him permanently, Triple H stayed and has been running creative ever since. The man who built WWE now watches someone else run it. Specifically, the man married to his daughter. The theory that Triple H and Stephanie leaked the NDA information to force Vince out remains unproven. But Vince McMahon's behavior since then follows a very specific pattern, ensuring Stephanie's name appeared in federal court documents, revealing on Netflix the exact story she refused to tell, declining to shield her in any interview or statement when he had every opportunity to do so. He didn't protect her. He answered the questions she refused to answer, and he smiled while doing it. Whether that reflects a coldly calculated campaign of retaliation or simply the behavior of a man who has never in his life recognized a line between family and product, between loyalty and leverage, between a storyline and reality, only Vince McMahon knows the answer. But the outcome is clear regardless of the intent. Stephanie's name is in federal court filings. Her most uncomfortable family moments are on Netflix for the world to watch indefinitely. Her daughter stepped away from the dream of following in the family business. And Triple H runs a kingdom that Vince built, knowing that the man who handed it to no one would rather watch it burn than see someone else sit on the throne. As of right now, the Janelle Grant lawsuit remains active in federal court. Stephanie McMahon was announced as the first inductee into the 2026 WWE Hall of Fame, with a ceremony held in April in Las Vegas as part of WrestleMania 42 week. Vince McMahon was not the one who inducted her. He wasn't even in the building. A father who once wanted to write himself as the father of his daughter's baby on national television was absent from a night the industry honored her career. Whether that reads as justice, irony, or just a closing chapter of a storyline that was always too real to ever be entertainment, that's for you to decide. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're not already subscribed to Effect Short, now is the time, because this kind of story is exactly what we're here for. And yet, even knowing all of that, there's a version of the story that gets overlooked almost entirely. The version where Stephanie McMahon is not just a victim of her father's retaliation, but a woman who spent her entire adult life trying to exist inside a system that was designed by a man who never truly saw her as separate from his own ambitions. Think about what Stephanie's career inside WWE actually looked like from the beginning. She didn't walk into a normal family business. She walked into Vince McMahon's world, which meant that from the moment she became a public figure, her identity was never fully her own. Her character on television was molded by her father's creative instincts. Her professional reputation was built inside a company her father controlled with an iron grip. And her most personal moments, her pregnancy, her wedding, her relationships, were all at some point considered raw material for storylines by the same man who signed her paychecks. Most people in that position would have walked away decades earlier. Stephanie didn't. She stayed. She fought for her place at the table, earned genuine respect inside the industry, became a legitimate executive, and built something real out of a situation that gave her almost no room to be anything other than Vince McMahon's daughter. The women's revolution in WWE, the shift that brought legitimate main event opportunities to female performers, that changed the way the entire industry thought about women in professional wrestling, that happened on Stephanie's watch. That was something she actively championed. Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Bayley. The generation of women who redefined what a WWE career could look like for a female performer. They got those opportunities in part because Stephanie McMahon pushed for them inside a company that had historically treated women as an afterthought. That legacy is real, and it now exists permanently alongside her name appearing in a federal sex trafficking lawsuit. That is what makes Vince's actions so devastating when you look at them clearly. It is not just that he exposed uncomfortable family stories on Netflix. It is not just that her name appeared in legal documents. It is that everything she built, every wall she constructed between herself and the darker corners of WWE's history, every carefully maintained public image, all of it became collateral damage the moment Vince decided that burning the house down was preferable to watching someone else live in it. There is also a conversation that needs to happen about Triple H in all of this, because his position is genuinely unlike anything else in the history of professional wrestling. Paul Levesque, Triple H, spent the better part of 3 decades as one of the most important performers and behind-the-scenes power brokers in WWE history. He married into the McMahon family. He built relationships, earned trust, and eventually became the person Vince himself handed creative control to win the first round of Scandal, Force, and Exit. By most accounts, Triple H's creative tenure has been widely praised. The product improved. Talent felt more valued. The storytelling became more coherent. He did the job well. And his reward for doing the job well is that he now runs a company while the man who built it apparently views him as a betrayer. He navigates press obligations knowing that every question about Vince McMahon is a landmine. He runs creative meetings in a building that Vince McMahon constructed from nothing, under a name that Vince McMahon made global, answering to a board that exists because of a merger Vince McMahon engineered. There is no clean version of that position. There is no way to hold those keys without feeling the weight of exactly how you came to hold them. And yet Triple H keeps showing up. He keeps running the shows. He keeps developing talent and building toward WrestleManias and doing the work that the job demands. Whatever is happening in the background of his personal life, whatever complicated emotions exist between him and a father-in-law who may actively resent his success, Triple H has chosen to channel everything into the work itself. His Hall of Fame speech in 2025 was a masterclass in emotional tightrope walking, acknowledging Vince, crediting him, not condemning him, not pretending the history doesn't exist, just holding 2 contradictory truths at the same time, gratitude and grief, respect and resentment, and finding a way to speak honestly without detonating what remains of a fractured family. Whether that restraint is strategic or genuine probably doesn't matter. The effect is the same. Triple H is still standing, still working, still building. What happens next is a question that nobody has a clean answer to. The Janelle Grant lawsuit remains active. Federal civil cases of this nature move slowly, and the full weight of what those proceedings might reveal has not yet landed publicly. There are documents still under seal, depositions still pending, and a legal process that does not move on anyone's preferred timeline. Vince McMahon, for his part, sits outside all of it now in a formal sense. No title, no board seat, no institutional role. $776 million in his pocket from the TKO share sale, and no daily obligation to answer for any of it in a professional context. The man who once controlled every element of his public image now exists largely at the mercy of court documents, documentary footage, and whatever journalists choose to publish. The speculation about McMahon potentially attempting to reacquire WWE from TKO has circulated in various forms. Whether that is serious intent or wishful thinking from someone who cannot accept a life without the company he built, the mere possibility of it is enough to keep the tension alive. Because if Vince McMahon ever found a path back into WWE ownership, the already fragile arrangement that currently exists between him, Stephanie, and Triple H would collapse entirely. There would be no tightrope left to walk. Stephanie McMahon's 2026 Hall of Fame induction represents something genuinely significant in that context. The industry formally recognized her contributions. Her peers voted with their respect. And the ceremony happened without her father present, which means for one night at least, her legacy belonged entirely to her. No Vince, no shadow, no storyline. Just Stephanie McMahon, standing in a room full of people who acknowledge